All right. Here we are, another episode of the Journey Freedom Podcast. I am Dr. B. I am your host today. So many exciting things that are happening as we are in the middle of October. Cannot believe we are in the middle of October. I'm like, where did 2025 go? This is going to be the best year of my life. All these things, wonderful things are going to happen. And I feel like I'm just getting started. Joe, I just turned 60 in March. So this was a year of like, okay, now, I don't have much time left, but I feel like my dad's 86. We ran in a track meet with him in July. So I'm not going anywhere unless God just, hurricane or something that takes me away. So I feel like I'm just getting started because like I didn't have all the wisdom that I have now. I guess some people might not call it a lot of wisdom. I'm trying to call it wisdom, but just the thought process of getting up in the morning and what I'm excited about. Yes, things hurt when I would get up in the morning. I'm going to go for a jog. No, I'm going to go for a walk. And in that walk that's, even halfway through the walk, I'm feeling it in my knees and back and everything else. And, oh my gosh. But when I start thinking about how to make an impact or how we're going to change the world, the world changes. I think in the last century, the last 100 years, and all the things that have changed in the world. I'm obviously 40 of those years I wasn't around, but just in my lifetime, I can remember. Because tomorrow I'm doing a summit. It's a summit workshop. It's called Relationship versus AI. So if somebody goes to relationshipversusai.com and they go to this event, which I'll do over and over again, I'm talking about artificial intelligence. And so when I was in high school, or I got my master's in educational technology in the 90s, I was teaching teachers how to use like overhead projectors and VCRs, right? There was no internet. There was no, we're going to come on in virtual reality. I mean, iRobot wasn't even a movie yet to even think about talking about. We were like a Buzz Rogers or something like that, and it looked like a sparkler coming out of the back of a machine or something. So I think of like, what if I was 21 years old today, and what my life would be like with all the scrolling and the relationships. When we were kids in the summer, summer's ending, and we're getting ready for Halloween, we stayed outside till the street light came on. We weren't thinking about sitting inside playing. There, Pong. That was enough to my attention for 20 minutes, and then I had to go outside and play because going back and forth on a little ball going across the screen. Or the arcade, like, do they even have arcades now that you can go to and play video games and put a quarter in? I think you get a card or something. Oh my gosh. Oh man, you think of all the changes. And so I'm so excited to have Joe on today. And if you have the ability to learn about AI and the excitement that not only I have in life, but I'm sure you as well, Joe. But this podcast is dedicated to helping people figure out what are those next steps. What is that journey? Because the journey truly never ends. They say I have the universe, and you see it on here where it says becomingtheperson.com. So I have a community where we really talk about relationships, and people can get under the community. And when we're talking about the relationships, like, how do I make sure I cultivate relationships that I can cultivate for the rest of my life? How are they going to serve me tomorrow, the next year, and the year after that, when we're in the society that changes? We were in a society that we had to know everything. You probably remember, like, we had spelling tests every week when I was growing up. We had to learn how to write in cursive when I was growing up. We had to memorize all these multiple choice things all the time. Today, you can't find cursive in a school unless it's a special elective, right? I don't know that they do a whole lot of spelling tests, because why? What do you, I mean, I guess if you want to write somebody a letter or a note, but email, like, who writes people a letter or note? And then we do it all with our thumbs, right? We get these
right there. Yeah, I was about to say,
that's little computers that we have in our hands, and it's so much different. But Joe, I'd love for you to kind of just share with us your life, like where you came from, how you grew up, the differences in what you do now, and then why you do what you do now. So fun to hear. And it's like all my guests, I tell them, hey, you can talk about whatever you want during your story. And I tell them, well, I don't know if I'm saying the right. You can't get your story wrong. That's why I tell all my guests, is like, it's your story. And so if it's interesting to you, it'll probably be interesting to us. I mean, I wouldn't want you to go through like an English class in college each week that you were in that class and what you guys did. That would probably be pretty boring. But there's so many folks that go, wow, if he was there and he did that, I could too. And if we're going to able to give impact and inspiration to folks that are listening today, I think that'll be super fun. So, Joe, the floor is yours. Take your time, have some fun, and then we'll chop it up after your story. So, thank you.
Awesome. Well, hey, Dr. B, so appreciate you. And again, honored to be on this with you today. I would just want to do a real quick logistical thing. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you great. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, perfect. Hey, so my story, I mean, I think the thing that you mentioned at the end was probably the most compelling is the why piece. Why do I do what I do? And I think if I maybe even start there, it allows you to understand me a little bit better, but also it allows me to weave into part of my story. Right now I am at Colorado Uplift. It's an organization that's all about impacting the future. It's the belief that every child, every youth has infinite value and worth, and that the best investment we can make in our future is by investing in our youth today. And I've been here for almost 8 years now. I serve as the CEO of the organization, and I've never been more fulfilled in my life. And the reason why I've never been more fulfilled is because I really feel like I'm walking in my calling every day. And so the story behind that is this. I was born into a military family. My father served in the Air Force for over 22 years. I went into the Air Force myself, and I served for over 23 years. But my path to Uplift had a lot to do with looking at my father's life of service. When my dad was in the Air Force, he decided to retire, and he went back to Louisiana, where he was originally born, and started working in group homes. And he also was doing counseling because he's a licensed professional counselor, excuse me. And then he also worked to provide staff assistance to help develop nurses and that worked in a residential place for people who couldn't function normally in society. He pastored a church. And I say all that to say, he made some choices coming out of the Air Force that it just didn't make sense to me, because he had opportunities to go and be like a Bible college, or he could have worked for Boeing and made a lot of money. But instead, he chose to go back to Louisiana. He's serving in these group homes as a counselor, and then he also ended up pastoring a church. In a church that he pastors, it was one of the smaller churches that had expressed interest in having him come and be the pastor. In fact, they meet out of an old fish market, and it was in one of the most impoverished neighborhoods of Alexandria, Louisiana. And he had offers from these churches with big balconies and a lot more money and all kinds of expense accounts and things like that. But yet and still, he chose to go to the smaller church, and he chose to serve the state in residential homes and then work in these group homes. None of that made sense to me, because I'm like, Dad, you can go and get some money, right? Make some more money and put all your education, your experiences to use. But he told me at that time that he felt called to be in the community that he was serving in. And the reason why that's important is because it didn't make sense at the time, but it makes all the sense in the world to me now. And I get what he's talking about, because I too had a similar experience. I mentioned that I was in the Air Force for over 23 years. Most of my assignment and most of my time, I spent about 12 of those years at the Air Force Academy, teaching character and leadership for both the faculty and the staff. That was my responsibility as the director for the Center for Character and Leadership Development, as well as the permanent professor for character and leadership development. And we were in a process of actually breaking ground on a brand new building and We're excited about some of the new things that were going to happen at the Air Force Academy as it relates to character and leadership development. But I had an experience that kind of changed that for me. I was going to Louisiana to visit my dad on leave one time, and we were at one of the group homes that he was serving in. And he said, "Hey, son, won't you come in and talk to these young men?" There was a group about 12 or 13 young men. Talk to them about life and some of those leadership lessons and goal setting and things like that you do at the academy with these young men. I'm like, "Yeah, Dad, I'm happy to do that." So sitting in this group home, talking to these teenage young men about life. And what hit me, Dr. B, was that these kids could not see any possibility beyond the 4th Street corners that they were currently living in. Wow. And it just gripped me. And I remember going back to the academy after visiting my father down in Louisiana, but came back to Colorado. And I'm in a hallway and I'm hearing cadets, at the academy that were a few years older, mind you, but they were talking about what, jet they're going to fly, what aircraft am I going to fly, or where am I going to go this summer? What immersion program am I going to do? Am I going to go to Spain or am I going to go to Italy? It's just a completely different trajectory in terms of what they saw as possibilities in their life. And that was something that juxtaposition just did something to me. And I was really haunted by the conversation that I was having with these young men in this group home where they didn't see any possibility. And I just remember just saying something's not right with that. So I was on my knees and we had a little closet in our bedroom. And I remember just praying to God, just to say, what is it for me to do? Is there something for me to do about this? And if so, what should I do about it? And I just continued to pray and pray and pray. And I just had this uneasy feeling. And even I got to the point where it's like, okay, I don't even know if I want to do something about it, but I just want this uneasiness to go away. Like I didn't feel settled in my soul. It's like, just take this away from me. But of course, God didn't take it away from me because he was working something. And I told my wife that I felt that God was calling us, ultimately to leave the Air Force and to put myself in a place and in a space where I can serve the kind of kids that I had spent time with in that living room in that group home down in Louisiana. And I told her, I said, I don't have a whole lot. She's a CPA. So the first question she asked me is, to do what? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how we're going to do it. And financially, I don't know how it's going to work out. But I do know I have 4 ingredients: character, leadership, these youth that were in need, and then perhaps something in the area of ministry. So we stepped out on faith. At that time, I had no idea about Colorado Uplift. Didn't know it even existed. I started doing a few things, continued to help with my dad's church after I retired, doing retreats and helping to teach. The local church we were attending in Colorado helped start a homeless ministry there. Did a lot of leadership consulting and traveled around helping with executive development and that type of thing, organizational development, things that you're very, very familiar with. But again, I'm still not quite living into that calling. So I decided, okay, well, maybe I need to establish a nonprofit organization that focuses on doing character and leadership development, some kind of ministry work with, kids that are, disadvantaged in some kind of way or that are challenged by, their socioeconomic status. So that's what I started doing. But in the process of standing up the nonprofit, I ran into a gentleman who actually was on the board for Colorado Uplift. And as I shared with him my heart and my vision and what I felt I was being called to, he said, "You look into Colorado Uplift." And I looked into Colorado Uplift and, came to find out this is an organization that now has been here for over 43 years, that is built based on that premise that I shared with you before of investing into our youth with the belief that they're infinitely valuable. And that we have opportunities to serve them in the schools and after school programming as well, provide mentors for them. And the whole mission of Colorado Uplift really is to really build these long-term life-changing relationships with urban youth. And the focus of that is to help them not only be able to survive in their communities, but to thrive in their communities. And so that to me just started feeling like maybe this is what I was called to. And oh, by the way, I've been here for almost 8 years, like I said, never more fulfilled in my life. But going back to my dad's story, I absolutely understood what my dad was feeling when he was called to go back to Louisiana, to be a part of that church that started in a fish market, to offer his services in a group home as a licensed professional therapist to help those teens out. So anyway, that's my story. I feel like I'm on a journey.
Mm-hmm.
All are. I'm grateful to be on this journey. For the things that I've been able to experience in the past. But much like you, I'm so looking forward to the future. And one of the things that gives me hope is when I look into the eyes of the youth that we get a chance to work with, and you see that they can see a possibility beyond their four street corners. When you see that they see possibilities in the future, and then we start looking generationally at the impact that they're now going to have on their sons and their daughters, and that their daughters and sons are now going to be in a position to impact others. And one of the things that's beautiful about Uplift, since we've been around for 43 years, we actually have staff members that used to be students. So I can actually tangibly see that future that I see in the eyes of these kids. Sometimes I can actually see the manifestation of that, right? From folks that used to be students here. And so it's just a beautiful thing to be a part of. I'm so excited again and so fulfilled to be able to be on this journey, and that God chose me to walk these steps with these youth and with the staff I get a chance to walk it with.
So cool. I got so many questions as you tell your story and all the things. And, I'm thinking, okay, so most of your life was in Louisiana then, right? As you were growing up.
So I was born in Louisiana, but because my father was in the Air Force, we moved all over. Gotcha. Yeah, so I went to 4 different high schools. I lived in Okinawa, Japan. We lived in New Hampshire, California, Washington State. So really all over, but we always consider Louisiana home. That's my grandparents were there. Uncles, aunts, cousins for the most part. So for the holidays, we were always making trips back to Louisiana. During the summer months, we'd go and, sometimes we'd stay there for, a month or two at a time when the schedule allowed.
Oh, cool. Because there's so much of a difference that I'm finding, because I grew up here in Denver, and then I went to college in California. And so my mom grew up in California. And so the West is where I've spent most of my life. And in the last few years, I've been taking a group of Black men down to Louisiana, or not to Louisiana, to Alabama, to do civil rights tours. And I'm going, this is a different planet. This isn't even just a different, part of the United States, just the way people act, the way people talk, the segregation is there. And then so I can imagine you coming to Colorado and going, what did I get myself into? I'm trusting God, but God, what you got going for me here? I mean, maybe kind of just talk a little bit about, I guess because you moved all around, you were familiar with lots of different cultures.
Yes, that was that's one of the beautiful things about being in the military. You do get a chance to get exposed to a lot. In fact, I spent 5 years in California myself. My dad was stationed at Vandenberg Air Force Base, right outside of Lompoc, California, Santa Maria, Santa Barbara, about 45 minutes from Santa Barbara. But yeah, so I did get a chance to get exposed to a lot of different cultures. Going to 5 different high schools, you lose some of the stability, but what you do gain from that is the interaction with a lot of different people and a lot of different cultures.
Yeah, and you said in your story that you're part of Colorado Uplift, which is 43 years old. Yes. And so I'm counting backwards. I'm like, well, how come I didn't go to Colorado growing up here, Uplift? And I'm like, oh, I was already 17, getting ready to go to college, when you guys started. And so, but what you've been able to do, I was on staff at Young Life for a while, and so I understand, that culture and the things. I was in California, on staff in California, and then moved out here and worked with Art Williams and some of the folks here.
That's I love Art Williams and I love Young Life. Yes.
Yeah. And so kind of maybe because it sounds like you were your brothers and sisters and family and everything was super important to you. But
Mhm.
that created identity for you. And then
Right.
something said, I need to go into the Air Force. Maybe talk about some of your identity shifts. Like, this is the person that I think God asked me to be. This is the person I am. And I have to become maybe a little bit different or something. Maybe just kind of talk to us about, or did you just already know, hey, I'm 3 years old, I'm going to go be a CEO of a nonprofit someday?
No, I think for me, my identity was shaped early on. I actually talk about this. I just recently published a book called Unreasonable Responsibility, Eradicating the Disease of Entitlement. And in that book, I talk about the importance of when you want to assume responsibility, your personal responsibility, it really starts with having that foundation of who you are and really taking a stand. And my dad used to always tell me, son, you got to stand for something or you'll fall for anything, right? And I grew up with that in my mind. And so the idea of being clear of who you are and what you stand for was something that was always important. And we used to call it, and we still do call it, it's the Sanders brand. It's like, what is our identity? And it included kind of a mixture of things like being buttoned up, being on time or early, and really just an emphasis on excellence. If you commit to saying you're going to do something, make sure you do it. So these were all things that were very, very important in terms of my identity. As I grew up. But I'd say the thing that really I would anchor all of my identity to is my identity in Christ. And I think the manifestation of that over the years for me has been through service. And I think that's for me the thing that I would say that has kind of encompassed. So whether I was in the Air Force serving my country, or I'm here at Colorado Uplift serving in this capacity in a nonprofit organization, which, by the way, still serves my country ultimately. And then I believe ultimately all of it serves the kingdom. Service for me is something that I've always come back to as kind of a manifestation of who I am. But yeah, that Sanders brand, being excellent in all you do, having integrity with what you say you're going to do, those are just things that were always drilled into me. And I would say those are things that I always stood on as a person. And then the manifestation of all of that for me has really been just a service and being a servant. And I recently went through a course, and they were like helping you try to shape who are you.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that we landed on for me as I was working through this with a group of folks around me in my cohort was an encouraging servant. And I think that's what I would say right now through all of that. If I had to land on one specific identity right now that best defines me is an encouraging servant. And then to what end do I serve is really so that others can lead. Um, so.
Oh, thank you. So cool. I'm writing all these things down, like those constructs that you put together and says, in order for me to be me, these are the things that I must be. I'm a man of my word. That
Yes,
has, or I
yes,
can't be.
yes,
But I want to relay that back now to our youth and the people that you serve, because as we think about our youth today, and we think about, maybe you can talk about a little bit about the family and how you're trying to raise a family, but that has to bleed over into the youth that you're serving,
hmm,
and you interact with so many different families that have so many different family values, so many different family beliefs, so many
yes,
different, like, some of it is, if I'm not late 15 minutes, then there's something wrong with me, right?
yes, yes,
So it conflicts with your values, because you're going, like,
yes,
no, you 5 minutes early is late, and you
yes,
15 minutes late thinking.
yes.
Maybe kind of talk to me, how
Oh,
do you raise your family and then work with
oh,
the.
wow. Well, I will say this too. It's so interesting. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about this, and we were reflecting on my first meeting here at Colorado Uplift, coming from the military, especially, right? Because I have this family value, but then just professionally over 23 years, you're on time. My original specialty code and job was I work with nuclear missiles, and you can't be late when you're dealing with nuclear weapons, right? You got to be on time. So anyway, that was like drilled in my head. So I show up at my first meeting here with like the bigger team, and I think it means at 8 o'clock. It's 8:05, and I'm looking at my chief operating officer, and I'm like, "What time does the 8 o'clock meeting start here?" Because like,
I thought 8 o'clock, at 8
you know,
o'clock.
by 8:15, everybody starts coming in. So we've been working hard to shift that, for sure. But just to your question though, yeah, I just think it really is an important thing for folks to understand. And what I think is the time itself is one thing, but I think more important is when you start having folks understand that this is more of a relational thing. This is more about the person. Is this a statement about who you are and also what you think about the person that you're meeting with or you're with. That's all part of it, right? So it's not just me saying you need to be here at 8 o'clock to get the mission done. With the military, we could just stop there. That's enough. But I think beyond that, when we start looking at being in relationship with people, understanding that there's a value that should be placed on that in terms of what you represent and how people view you. Because again, it's you want people to be able to trust you. If I say I'm going to be somewhere, it's part of my word, and I need to be able to honor my word. And so for me, to having that trust is important in a relationship. And I say this too. A good friend of mine actually, Carrie Zeller, and I used to talk a lot about this idea of integrity. And one example she always used, and I use it today too, is just, if somebody shows up at 9:05 and they have a really, 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 really good excuse. If you say 9:05 plus a really good excuse, it equals what? It equals late still, right? And I think sometimes we also give ourselves the out to say, well, I had this or I had this. No, 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 no. You said you're going to be here at 9. You need to be here at 9 or earlier because it's part of the word you gave to me, and it's part of me engendering trust in our relationship. That's what it's communicating, and it also for me to communicate a consideration for you and your time. So anyway, so that's my how I've talked about it with my kids. They sometimes get it, they don't always get it, but I do think everybody understands and appreciates trust. And when you can put it in those terms, and it's like, hey, it's not gonna be about the time thing. Here, it's gonna be about trust, and it's also gonna be about me showing some appreciation and a consideration for your time. Then all of a sudden, that conversation takes a different direction because sometimes they just don't even see it that way. Because to your point, it's like it's okay. I'm sure about 9:15. It's just 9:15. What's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that you're communicating something about who you are, and you're also communicating something about what you think about me.
Yeah, that's why it's so interesting. I mean, we're on the time thing, and I'm such a relational person, right? And so, I say to myself, I'm making a commitment to this individual that I'm going to be here at this time, and that's what I would do. And then this individual over here has an issue, and so I'm trying to solve an issue which I think is important in that relationship. But then I have to go, okay, what about the relationship that I'm trying to build over here?
Yeah.
And my dad is one of those people, like, if you're not he was military, I grew up on Laurie Air Force Base playing on when you were allowed to, right? When I could climb up on airplanes and on tanks and all that kind of stuff way back in the 70s, whatever it was.
Yes.
Now you can't even get on the base. But as a kid. But when I think about it, like, he's like 5 minutes early, you're not there. And he's like looking at his watch. And I can tell there's anxiety around time for him. And so by being able to be more mature and recognize that, I never make appointments with my dad that are a specific time. I say, Dad, I'll be there between 9 and 9:30. Now it gives me that opportunity. My plan is to be there at 9, but then he doesn't get as upset if I'm there at 9:02. Yeah. Even though there's nothing to do, all I'm doing, Dad, is changing your filter for your heater in your house.
But you gave your word. You gave your word. And that's yes.
Important. And so kind of dealing with, and then so you think of other things. When we think about relationship, are there certain things as you're building a relationship, or that you've learned with the youth and the folks that are coming, that I can't just show up as refined Joe or I am jokes. This is who I am at this point in my life, but I can't show up with that person with all the beliefs and I mean, the beliefs and values, yes, but acting according to those all the time, like somebody's done something wrong if they don't meet your expectations. I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. This expecting them to be where you're at. And
Yes.
then, so what do you do to build that relationship so someday they could get there? I know I went a long way around that to kind of get to the expectation part, because I don't want you to change your values, your beliefs, but I'm just saying
Yeah.
you got to show up
Yeah.
as not the person who's expecting them to be there, I guess.
Yeah. So, and I think there's a couple things I'd say on that is, so yeah, definitely don't change the value because you want to be able to model what you're asking for.
Yeah.
I think the big key though, and one of the things I've had to learn is having expectation without judgment. I think
Whoa.
it's
Okay.
critical,
Yeah.
right? So if I have an expectation that somebody's going to be somewhere, but then I add to it a judgment that they're not here because they are this, and this. That to me is what causes problems. Now, because for me, if I didn't show up that way, because that's probably how I'm wired, I would think, but it doesn't mean that this person over here is thinking that way because they may not value time the same way. So it's not necessarily a judge. So although it could communicate that to me, I don't want to assume that and
Yeah.
judge them for that. So I think that's the first thing I'd say is just to remove the judgment and even some of the emotional responses from that when that person doesn't maybe show up or do exactly what you wanted them to do. And that part of it is the other thing I say too is getting a person not so much to focus on doing things just like you, being a model for them, absolutely. But there has to be a level of ownership for them, right? And you want to have a person see, what is valuable to them and then hold them accountable to that. So for instance, if a person says to me that I want to be a CPA in an organization and I want to show up this way and I got to do all these things, whatever they say they want to be or want to be an athlete, whatever. And then we all agree that in order to do that, there's some discipline, right? You got to be timely. You got to do all those things. Now I'm going to hold you accountable for those things in the context of what you want to do, not in the context of what Joe Sanders wants you to do. So I think for me to remove the judgment is one, and then also think having those types of behaviors be tied to something that they value, not just your value. I think that's critical. And I think when we meet people where they're at and we're able to bring them along that way, you start seeing change and transformation. But yeah, if you just come and impose your value and you say, hey, you got to be here this way, it just doesn't happen. And I was actually, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, and they were asking me a very similar question. And the idea of having patience and being able to have space to work with people, I think that all is really important, especially like you said when you're looking at a relational piece of this, right? And what our model here is really we talk about long-term life-changing relationships. I feel like when you have a trusting relationship, you can create those structures of challenge, structures of support, and structures of accountability. But sometimes if people just try to add accountability, right, without the trusting relationships in that context, it doesn't work. Or have accountability without the support. It's like, hey, how can I help you with this? That doesn't work either. And then you try to give me a challenge, you don't even know me, right? So all of those things, it's important for us to be mindful of. And I think if we're not, then we're going to miss something somewhere, and it's not going to go well for either us or the person that we say we care about. So those are some things I would throw out there on that.
Man, I love that, because as I remember being, in a leader position and helping young folks, in this space. And, let's say somebody comes up and they have, language, whatever, whether they're using the language or they're talking about somebody in a way that you go, this is not respectful. But you got to meet them where they're at, right?
Yes.
And at that same time, you're going, okay, I got to show you an example. I have to show you what this looks like.
Yes.
But I love you saying not judging, because a lot of the issues that my young leaders had were they were judging them on how they showed up. and saying, I can't believe this person is, I remember when I was a teacher and I'm going to the teacher's lounge, and I'm at an urban school, and, it's whoever the teachers are that are there, and the way that they complain about the students, instead of being the solution, they want to complain about all the problems that student has, not knowing anything about their culture, not knowing anything about their upbringing, not knowing anything about the situation that they're going through, to get to school, in some cases, hungry. Right? How are you going to act when you're hungry in the morning?
Yeah.
You're showing up to school, right? But what I love, the other part of that I want to ask you about here is you brought up the word accountability. And when I hear that assumes leadership. And because you're not holding somebody accountable unless you have an influential position. And did you get permission somehow to hold somebody accountable? Because I think some people show up in relationships sometimes that they just assume that they're the leader and they're going to tell the person what to do and how to do it. And at the same time, because of our positions or whatever, you're in an assumed leadership position. How do you teach that or grow that or understand the fine line between, okay, it's time for me to step in as a leadership role if you just met somebody, or are you getting that permission for accountability piece?
Yeah, I love the question. And I think for me, I think part of what I advocate is removing accountability. You have to be accountable as a leader, right? There is an element of that. But I think it's leaning not on the role I have for the accountability, but it's the relationship I have for the accountability, right? So that's the key, right? It's in the context of a relationship. So when you have somebody that you have a relationship with, that accountability shows up differently than somebody who is just your boss. So a boss holding you accountable, there's instruments of compliance. A person in a relationship with you holding you accountable, we're exchanging commitments, right? We're leveraging commitments then, and we can have a common commitment. In fact, I'm holding you accountable because I'm committed to you. And I think about it more of kind of as a coach or a spotter, right? You're in the gym with this person, and this person says, "Hey, I want to bench press, 300 pounds," and that's a challenge, right? And they got to own that challenge, and you're going to be like, "Hey, I'm here to spot you. I'm here to support you in that," right? And then if there's some workouts that need to occur with that, I might remind you that, hey, if you said you want to bench 300 pounds, and you said you're going to work out today and you're going to practice, you're going to do some reps, right? Like that's something you committed to. That's something you want to do. And I'm speaking into your commitment, right? Or maybe into a common commitment if I'm at the organizational level, right? So there's a broader kind of accountability that we all have. So I think the thing I would say on that one, Dr. B, is shift the accountability from merely being, I'm the leader in a position, I'm holding you accountable, to saying, I'm in relationship with this person. I have a commitment to this person based on that relationship, or we have a common commitment to the organization, to the team, to the family, and I'm going to hold you accountable based on that, not my position.
Oh man, I love it, because when you start thinking about that and you think about friends and friends that you have, and some of the biggest drawbacks we have is we don't hold each other accountable for stuff. And then you go, wait a minute, what is my responsibility in any relationship?
Yes.
One is to listen and be there for you.
Yes.
But the other part of it is that accountability piece, because we can't let our loved ones and people just do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it and then expect, to have positive results.
Yeah.
And that.
And I think, and it's one of those things too. And you're holding them accountable to something that they said they want to do, like they've committed to. When I was at the Air Force Academy, one of the biggest challenges that we have our honor code there. The honor code is, not lie, steal, or cheat, nor tolerate, among us anyone who does. And their cadets not lying and not cheating, they didn't have a problem with that part of the honor code. But the toleration part of it that says, I'm not going to tolerate anybody else around me lying, stealing, or cheating, right? That was hard for them, because what they saw that is, well, if I see somebody who is cheating or lying, then I have to turn this person in, right? Or I have to engage this person in something. I have to tell them about them. I have to do something. I have to hold them accountable. And they struggle with that because, like, what about my loyalty to them? And, we're buds and we're friends and things like that. But when we would get in conversation with them, it's like, who are you being loyal to? Are you being loyal to the person that they said they wanted to be when they came to this institution? Are you being loyal to that leader, that leader of character that they say they want to be? Are you being loyal to helping them do that and hold them accountable to that? Or are you being loyal to their smallness? Are you being loyal to them getting away with something or not being who they should be? That to me doesn't help a person, right? That says I care more about what that person thinks about me than I care about the person. So if I really care about the person and I really care about them being their best, I'm going to hold them accountable to that end.
Wow. So good. We're going to continue this conversation at another time because we can get so deep into this. This will be a whole hour just on accountability. I want to kind of talk about expectations and not expectations, but example and comparison. Because we live in an age now, and you deal with youth all the time, where we're scrolling, we're online, we're looking at people's best lives, and we're comparing our lives to their lives, and somehow we feel like we're not enough. And as you're an example, and I speak in front, we get to a stage in life where like it doesn't matter what everybody says anymore. We're done comparing, but we still compare. I say like when I went to this event that I told you, the Trusted Edge event, that I learned about trust, and then wanted to come back and create this podcast. I would say to myself, I don't need to see other people who look like me doing things that I'm capable of doing. I can just go do it myself. I have enough in me to do it. And yet, I told you how many people of color were in the room, which tells me that I'm counting, right? And so that matters. And then I'm comparing. And, I can say to myself all day, it doesn't matter, but it still must matter a little bit in my life. Otherwise, why would I go in a room and count and even care?
Yeah.
And so when you think about comparison and how you teach others how to deal with that, and it's something we all do and we all fight against, and then we try to be this example at the same time that people, do you want them to compare you to their own lives because you're trying to be the example, because you're doing a good job of being it? Maybe kind of just talk to me about this whole comparison thing and how it can hurt us or help us.
Yeah. So, again, I think when I look at modeling, I make a distinction between modeling and comparison.
Cool. All right.
And I think that's part of where I would say that there is a little bit of a divergence, because the idea of modeling and modeling the way, showing somebody how to do something and then them moving towards something. They're not trying to, or they should be trying to replicate you, but hopefully, again, it gets back to they should be leveraging that to become the person that they've said they wanted to become. So now I have models that help me to become who I want to become. So it's still not about me being my model. I'm only emulating those things to the extent that it's serving me to become the person I need to become, which is why, again, if somebody's helping me become that person, them holding me accountable to that, they're holding me accountable to me being the person I said I want to become, not holding me accountable to being like me or person, right? So that's how that flows for me. And I do see a lot of comparisons happening, unfortunately, where we compare, and if we fall short of, in our mind, being like that other person, it creates all types of feelings of inadequacy and that type of thing. But for me, it's like, if you're striving to become somebody, if you're growing and you're like, and again, I love that word become, because we're always becoming. If you're making progress there, if you're still on that journey, I mean, to me, you should not have any feelings of shame or remorse about that. And now you might say, I'm not moving as fast as I want to move. Okay, got that. But that's okay. Just keep moving. Just keep moving. And I also will tell you this too. Some of the greatest lessons I've learned in my life have been ones where I felt like I was kind of stuck a little bit. I wasn't like, things weren't happening like that, because sometimes when things are happening so fast, you don't have time to take it in. You don't have time to reflect. So every now and then, even if you're not, and I would love it if there was I heard a coach talk about the other day, developing his players. If there was a fast forward button you can hit and take them from a freshman, player to being a senior player. But when you do that, you miss out on the learning and the growth that's required to sustain that over a longer period of time. So yeah, so I think that's what I would say to that, this idea of modeling versus comparison, and in your comparison, your assessment of who you are should be in relation to somebody else. It should be your relationship to the commitments that you've made in life, and really the goals that you have for yourself.
And I love this. I'm going to ask you a question. I said I'm never going to ask you a hard question, but if you don't want to answer the question, no, because I'm going to ask you about your life, and maybe if you want to share a little bit. But one of the things, I just wrote a book called Be Do Have, becoming the person that God put you on this earth to do, and you have to be that person before you do and have. And one of the examples that I give is we spend so much time trying to do, then we have, and then we try to become, right?
Yes.
Because we get this all backwards. So one of the things I can remember when I started working at the high school, and then I was teaching at the university, and I was making more money, I wanted to have what I thought that money represented, right? Mm-hmm. So I went to the BMW dealership, and I purchased this BMW. I was going there to get a 3 Series, and they convinced me to walk out with a 7 Series that was used, but it was older. But I'm now, like in the flagship 750 IL, I'm driving around. So I haven't become the person who that should be. I'm a high school teacher on a high school salary, and now I'm teaching at the university too. And I can remember myself, I'm driving around the university as I go there, like in circles. I'm 27 years old or something like that, just waving at people as if like I'm showing this is what I got, right? I haven't done the thing that deserves the car yet. I shouldn't have the thing, but our society allows us to have things first. Mm-hmm. But what I should have been doing is spending the time on becoming that person who now should, because if you become the person, you can't help but do. And when you can't help but do, the things you need to have end up happening.
Yes.
Are there any examples that you have where becoming, whether it's a student or somebody, where it be, trying to do something first or have something first got in the way of, or created a mistake or something that happened that you would love to share? I know it's probably a tough thing to have.
Well, the fortunate thing is, I would say I do have examples of students who have gotten it right, where they focus on who they are and seeing the leader inside, and then they end up becoming
cool. Yeah,
really good things. So that's a good thing. But the other unfortunate thing, though, about this is that there are a lot of examples of people who focus on that have first. I love your model, because I do think it starts with who you are. And I think life and even leadership, right, is a manifestation of who we are. And there was a book that was written years ago. It says, who you are is how you lead, right? Even like just getting to like the core of your identity. That's why I appreciated those questions. But yeah, I could definitely, without giving names, I mean, I think you could just turn on the television and you pick up I could right now, if I open up my Twitter, I can see people that have that flipped around, for sure. And I also think for me, I have had that in the past where I've looked at life that way. And the example I gave for my dad, when I told you I didn't understand the decision he made, because when he was retiring from the Air Force, I was thinking, you should have this, like you have this degree, you have this, you should have this. But that wasn't his calling. And his calling was based on who God was calling him to be. God was calling him to be a minister, and God was calling him to be a servant in the community. He was calling him to that. But in my mind, I was focusing on, but Dad, you can have this house. Dad, you can have this car. Dad, you can have this expense account. Dad, you can have, 1,000 people in your congregation instead of the 25 that's sitting in this pew. I mean, so for me, that's an example that I can share. And I probably got 1,000 more, but that's one I've already talked about. So I'd go to that one for me, where I was focusing more on the have as opposed to the be, which is why when I kind of, fast forwarded my life and I say, I get it now. I do get the importance of us being and living into our calling. And then like you said, all the other things you're doing as a manifestation of that and you're having, it follows. it really does follow.
Yeah. I think so much of like some of the young folks that will, let's say they want to be a rapper, right?
Mhm.
And they go out and they're standing around a trash can, or they got a group of friends and they're doing their songs, they're doing their rap to folks, and then all of a sudden they say, well, I did it. And then the expectation is I'm going to go into the studio, I'm going to pay for some studio time, and I'm going to make a demo, and then the demo is going to blow up. I'm going to have 100,000 subscribers to my channel, and I'm going to make it big. And then they haven't become the person who could even handle some of that, or even God saying, wait a minute, no, you did one demo. You haven't been in the studio
Yes.
for the amount of hours. You're not very good at this. The things you're saying, I'm not interested in. All those things, but the expectation is we get to have,
Hmm.
right? And because we did a little bit, and I think that's where I'm starting to find, as I'm coaching and teaching people, is there's this expectation is if I just show up,
Hmm.
somehow I get to have
Yeah.
without going through that process of becoming.
Yeah. I agree
You
with that.
agree?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes.
So where you're at now, to in the position that you're at, what are some of the things that you do on a daily basis that you contribute to your own getting better as becoming the person that you want to be in order to do what you're doing, in order to to me, it's constant learning. It's not just I've
Hmm.
arrived and I'm here. It's
Yes.
I got to continue to work on me if I'm going to be effective to other people that I'm serving. What is your personal development process look like that you do?
Yeah. No, that's good. So first of all, my days always start with prayer and quiet time with the Lord. Um, just really opening my heart and my mind to what God has for me. Um, so I think that's the first and foremost things. If I look at the routines of my day, um, I also um, read,
No.
and whether it's scriptures or books, articles. So I try to spend time reading to your point to try to get knowledge and figure things out and really create context and understand constructs that could inform what I'm up to that day or that week or that month. And then the other thing that I think is really important is engaging in meaningful conversation like this. I mean, I've grown in the past hour just talking to you. So I think conversation and being in conversation with other people is important. And one of the things I'll say about conversation and even communication maybe or today is that a lot of times we surround ourselves with people who are gonna basically tell us what we want to hear, and they think exactly like us. So I think it's really healthy every now and then to engage in conversation with people that may not see things exactly like you see them, but have it be constructive, right? So I think constructive, meaningful conversations on a regular basis is important. And then I think kind of an extension of that is, where you have your friends and your support folks that we talked about that circle where you have relationship with challenge, support, and accountability inside those relationships, being able to get feedback from those folks that you have those trusted relationships with, and just to ask them, hey, I did this today. What are your thoughts on this? Or maybe I, did this and you saw me do it, and maybe it did to you. Talk to me through this. So I think constructive, meaningful conversation, but also seeking advice and feedback from those that we have trust relationships with is important as well.
I love it. Associations, reading, and spending time with the Lord. Yeah, that's a formula for success that hopefully you guys are paying attention to. I got pretty much one major question that I want to ask you. I don't know if it's a major question; it's just a question. Before we end, and I'll let you kind of uh, close us out. But one of the things about being a dad, and especially I believe that all of us believe that every child should have a mom and a dad that's part of their upbringing, and somebody to look up to. But what we don't talk about a lot is what does it mean to be a dad, and
Mhm.
how has that impacted our lives, and
Mhm.
what do we do differently as a dad, you know that we may not have done if we never had kids. And you have to split it because you have youth that you work with, and you're still a dad.
Yeah.
So, what kind of talk to me about your thought process of what does it mean in the responsibility of being a dad?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think back to the day when my son, oldest son, was born. I have two boys and a girl. My oldest son is 27 years old now, and I still remember that day when he was born. Like that just fundamentally shifted my world and my thinking, like immediately, because I went from thinking about doing things that would help me fulfill all my aspirations in this world to saying, wow, now something that's more important to me is that he fulfills on his goals and his aspirations in this world. And you mentioned that responsibility. I now feel a sense of responsibility for that. Like I feel a sense of responsibility for that to provide for him the character, the foundational pieces that we talked about earlier, that I help to shape that identity. And then in some cases, even resources and access to things. I mean, so all those things was just like, it flooded me. It just hit me in that moment. And I don't think since that day, I've had a day where I haven't thought about that. And it's been that way for him, my daughter that came 18 months later, and then my youngest son, who's about 12 years younger. It's just or 10 years younger. I mean, that's just one of those things that has just been the way I'm showing up, and I show up in the world now thinking about how can I provide, how can I be a person who can help them fulfill on their dreams and their aspirations. And I actually have the same type of approach with the kids that I work with at Uplift, the same type of approach with the cadets that I work with at Air Force Academy. As I said before, I serve so they can lead. And when I think about them leading, it's them fulfilling on their aspirations in life. And that's a responsibility that I have now that's different than the one I had before my son Isaiah was born.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because it's so important. Sometimes we struggle with all the things that we have to do and what we believe society says about who we are as dads. But when we really take that on seriously and we say, this is, and sometimes it's hard. I'm not going to say there aren't divorced families. There aren't, you have to fight to be able to see your kids, and, somebody doesn't want you to see them and you got to do it. But once you take on that responsibility, yeah, it is huge. And for those out there, don't ever give up on it.
No, yes, it makes a difference, and I, for me, I, along those lines, you said it's just challenging because you want them to have those things, but you also get to the point where you can't want it more for them than they want for themselves, or you feel like you are, and then it's like, I got to meet them where they're at, so you kind of go back and forth, and then how do you communicate that to them? That's why you're doing. I mean, that's probably a whole nother hour of conversation. And so there's some pain that you're incurring with this too. I think when it comes to parenting and when it comes to leadership, it's like a full contact sports, right? Because there's wounds and there's bruises, you get bumped around, but like you said earlier, we got to stay in the fight, right? Because the dreams that our kids are living into, their aspirations, they're worth fighting for. They're worth fighting for.
Thank you, Joe. This has been so amazing. I would love for you to just maybe talk about what were the things we didn't talk about, or something that you said, oh, I really wanted to make sure we hit this point. I'd love for you to kind of, talk about, Colorado Uplift and how somebody would get involved, or just anything, your book, whatever it is that because I get to be so selfish for my first part of the show, where I get to learn and I get to grow and I get to become networking and a better person and all that kind of stuff. And then I just forget about the folks on the other side. But I want to make sure you have an opportunity to talk about what we did.
Well, I appreciate it. And I'll really keep it brief. I just, Colorado Uplift, if you want to, look us up, www.coloradouplift.org. You can go and read about some of the activities that we were engaging in. We actually are really excited now. We just actually signed a contract on property that we're going to be purchasing, a campus. And so right now, the way we're structured is we work in the schools, and we're continue to do that. But we also are going to have now the ability to have some on-site programming where we're going to have a community resource center that will provide for the needs of our folks and families that we serve, and whether that's mental health services or medical screening, English as a second language, bringing in some of our community partners that we serve with to be co-located with us in that community center and provide those services. We're excited to be able to provide that. We'll also have a sports complex with an outdoor sports field, indoor gym, to really leverage sports to reinforce the character and leadership that we try to develop with our kids. We're gonna have a leadership center. What we'll be to have people like Dr. B hopefully come and speak and share with our community. One of the things that you mentioned at the beginning that really resonated with me is I've been to educational workshops and things like that in the past too, and been to big conferences. And when I look around, there's not a lot of folks that look like me there. So my thought is, well, why not bring some of those types of things to the communities that we're serving in? So we're going to have a leadership center that's going to be world class, and it's going to allow for us to have a space for our community folks to be there, but also something that's attractive enough where people would want to come and speak and impart wisdom and expertise with our community. And so we'll do workshop series, we'll do classes there that will have college credit as well as high school credit for our students. So we're excited about that space. And then again, we'll have a landing page for that up soon. So if you want to hear more about that, just go ahead and check us out at our website there. And then you mentioned the book. I'll close on that because you talked about this earlier. This idea that you were describing about the people with the have, and they want the have without the do and the be. It resonates with me, and it's kind of the core of my book. It's all about eradicating the disease of entitlement. And for me, sometimes I think it's the entitlement mindset that people feel like they have a right to something, although they didn't earn it or they didn't put the time into it, but they have a right to it. And what I talk about in the book is how we need to eradicate that and shift that thinking. So much of freedom that we talk about in this world is oftentimes based on the rights that we have. And I do think that, yes, freedom does afford us a certain amount of, rights does afford us a certain amount of freedom. Yeah. But I also think there's a whole nother level of freedom that we're missing out on because we're not assuming responsibility. Mm-hmm. And I call this responsibility an unreasonable responsibility. Viktor Frankl, in his book, and I'll close with this, his book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is one of my favorite books, says, when we think about freedom, we miss the responsible part of it. And he said, in fact, what he suggests is in America, not only should we have the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, we actually need to erect a statue of responsibility on the West Coast to remind us of how those two things really go hand in hand. And so I would just say that I'm passionate about helping folks develop a sense of responsibility because I do believe it gives us access to freedom and more specifically, not just a basic responsibility of just doing your job, really being willing to go above and beyond in order to fulfill your commitment. And I know we've talked a lot about that already, so I thought it was okay for me to bring that back and say that a lot of that is in my book that I just published a couple months ago.
Cool. Can they get that book on Amazon? And
absolutely, Unreasonable Responsibility. You just type it in, Unreasonable Responsibility, into Amazon, and you'll be able to purchase it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I got 3 or 4 pages of notes that I've taken, and I hope this is not the last time that you and I talk. I'm going to invite you to talk in our community. The things that you are doing and the impact that you're making on the community and our youth is commendable. Not only commendable, it is needed. And so I just appreciate it. If you're someone who's out there and you're watching this is your first podcast, I love what Joe's doing. Go to their website, look him up, figure out a way to contact them. If you want to give them some money, I'm sure they're not going to say no. And so, whatever you got to do, because this is an opportunity for you. And so I would say go ahead and hit subscribe, notifications, all that thing. We have great shows that come out every single week that can help you become that person that you're wanting to be. Check out our universe. If you're watching this live today and you want to get part of the AI Summit, I'm going to do it again next month as well. And so if you want to know how to integrate that in relationships, please do that. And so don't forget, my friends, that you are God's greatest gift. He loves you if you allow him to. And now we're going to go to the next one. I can't wait to see you at the next one. And Joe, again, thank you for being part of what we do.
Thank you. My pleasure. Appreciate you.
You